You are the reason that liberty will survive. I want you to know that, because we have serious things to address tonight and in our country. I want you to think about this. If you wanted to destroy a child, if you wanted to almost guarantee that they would grow unstable, weak, insecure, indecent, vulnerable to predation of destructive forces, and lacking in a sense of agency, you might do the following. Darken their hearts by robbing them of their innocence, lie to them about the choices about drugs and sexuality and tell them that it has no consequences, gaslight them with chronic lies to create self-doubt and discourage critical thinking, teach them to hate their neighbors on innate qualities of which they can't control, encourage them to dominate others with those with whom they disagree, and to shun discussion in favor of bullying. You might encourage them to blame themselves and others for deeds they did not commit, and we would focus only on their flaws. And worst, label them selfish for standing up for the ultimate minority, the individual. We would call this child abuse. But in part, that describes what is being done today to our citizenry, where those who value liberty and freedom are portrayed as enemies of our nation and who watch as the values that have given rise to the most prosperous and free nation in history are turned on its head. Tonight gives me the chance to reintroduce, through Brent Hamachek, the decency that liberty itself defines. Today, when we are experiencing unthinkable events, Brent spends a lot of time thinking about them. He is the news editor for Human Events and also serves as the director of policy research for Middle Class Warriors. He has his own very successful consulting practice, specializing in sales and business culture and development. He speaks and has written extensively and is published currently at Human Events and at his own website, brenthamachek.com. I highly recommend you check out Brent's writing. He also played a key role in the development of Turning Point USA, co-authoring Charlie Kirk's first book, Time for a Turning Point, and serves on their advisory council currently. He also co-hosts a weekly show on Simul TV titled Tamara Lee's Trend On, featuring Brent Hamachek. We are excited to partner in presenting tonight's program with Simul TV, which you will be able to find a recording of tonight's program. Brent's clear, insightful, spot on, tight, and unapologetic pieces inspire to wake up, speak up, show up, and stand up. His fight represents the goodness and decency reflected in the principles of American liberty. Brent is both a honey badger and a honey. Welcome to the Liberty Forum, Brent Hamachek.
Well, I'm not sure about being a honey. I don't think anybody's ever called me that before. It is a treat to be here. Just a quick small correction, because I never want to have anything on the record that isn't quite right. I was a member of the Turning Point Advisory Board. I'm not in that role any longer, but it was a great run, and it's certainly a treat to work with Charlie Kirk, who we'll talk about. But anyway, this is, for me, this is remarkable. I cannot believe that I'm standing here. Now, I would have had this on my bucket list if I had ever thought it was possible. I mean, you're supposed to put things on your bucket list that you can actually do. Meeting Springsteen was on it. I did that. Meeting Stallone was on it. I did that. This wasn't on it. I need to redo my bucket list. So, but it's a real privilege to be here. I mean, I look at the past speakers that you've had, and I look at the list and I look at the pictures and I think, wow, if you printed out all of those pictures and you'd have mine now, it would be printed out too. And I thought, it doesn't fit, it doesn't make sense. And I thought, well, of course it does, because you have to have a place to set your coffee cup. So I am thrilled to be included on the list of speakers. Look, a couple of thank yous. First of all, to Jane for finding me and asking me to speak here. I assumed that when I got the call that she was making a mistake. And so I said, sure, I'll do it quick before she maybe figured it out. And I thought, well, maybe she just thought I was Anderson Cooper, because I get that a lot. But no, I'm not Anderson Cooper. I can beat him arm wrestling too, by the way. So I'm really grateful for that. And, you know, speaking of Charlie Kirk, I do this whenever I speak, because I wouldn't be here tonight if it weren't for the fact that close to 8 years ago, a friend of mine by the name of Bill Freck got me to sit down and have dinner with this still 18-year-old phenom who had started a group called Turning Point USA. And I wasn't even sure why I was having dinner with him. And but Bill seemed to think that maybe I could help him somehow. And it has been the privilege of a lifetime to be able to work alongside him, to have been involved in the early days of Turning Point. He just might be the answer to what can save Western civilization. I'm not here tonight if it's not for him and for the path that he started me on. So always a debt of gratitude there. So we have some serious stuff to talk about tonight. We get to talk about it in person. Nice to be in person, right, everybody? You know, we get used to looking at people in 2 dimensions, and we discover that we're missing the 3rd dimension. 3rd dimension, of course, being depth. And then we get in front of people in person and we realize some are still missing depth. So, but at least we got a better shot at it if we're here live, and we are tonight. So it's serious times in our country, and we're going to have a serious conversation. I am known for my strong position that I think optimism is the 8th deadly sin. I'm not a fan of optimism. So people say, well, then you must be a pessimist. And I say, no, I'm a realist. It's just that they happen to look a lot alike these days. So what we'll do tonight is maybe we'll have a little bit of fun, but we'll be a little serious because these are serious times. And I approach issues in a little bit of a different way. So I was watching a TV show not too long ago, and there was this young college student talking to his professor about a paper he wrote. And he said, what did you think of my paper? And the paper said, the professor said, well, I thought it was quite a derivative work. And I sat in my chair and I went, because I know as a writer and as someone who tries to think about ideas, there is no greater insult than being told that you're derivative. But we're all derivative, right? All the great thinkers were derivative. They're all products of the people that came before them, the times they live in. They draw from those that wrote about this where they agree or disagree, and they build on that. What I try to do in the work that I do is I try to find ways to get people to be able, well, to help them be able to predict and to help them be able to act. So I try to make sense of things. Last general note of introduction before we jump into this. I really was thinking when I looked at your list of speakers, I thought, what on earth am I doing here? I mean, in a serious way. And it reminded me of giving a keynote address at a national sales conference a few years ago. And I thought in my hotel room the night before, why on earth am I addressing an international conference of salespeople? And then I sat down with a notepad, a paper, and a pen, and I started to figure something out. And I realized that over the years, I had actually directly sold product or service into 17 different industries. And most people don't get a chance to do that. And when I thought about that, I thought, okay, I can go talk to them tomorrow. Maybe I have something to say. Well, in terms of being able to predict and act and understand, I was thinking, why am I here tonight? Well, it's because the last 2 presidential elections, I picked accurately. I didn't pick them accurately a week before they happened. I picked them accurately 20 months before they happened, before either of the last 2 winning candidates got in the race. So I don't say that to tell you that I'm wonderful. I tell you that because it means that I do have some ability to understand what's going on in America, or I wouldn't have been able to do that. By the way, during the questions and answers, if anybody wants to ask me why for 1 week during each of those 2 campaigns, I doubted myself, I will tell you. And it's a failure of a rational mind. So I tell people I come from a mixed philosophical background. I am half objectivist. So my pronouns are I and me. Atlas shrugged at my lapel. I'm also half Catholic, so I feel guilty about my choice of pronouns. So I'm going to try to work through that. I always want to be a college professor. And this is as close as I'm ever going to get because I'm working my own PowerPoint. This is kind of fun. Watch this. This is so cool. Everybody watching? Here we go. All right. Let's get into this. What on earth is going on? This is from Human Events Today, my story, where we have the FBI on social media encouraging friends and family to report friends and family for their social media posts when they think that they might be a threat. This sound familiar? This is NKVD stuff. This is the Stasi. This is what we saw in Eastern Europe. I meant to look it up before this evening and I forgot. My colleague at Human Events, Jack Posobiec, knows this number by heart. But I know it was well north of 80% when the Iron Curtain finally fell. It was north of 80% of the people in East Germany who had actually at some time or another turned somebody else in. This is what totalitarian regimes rely on. They depend on us turning in others. There aren't enough of them to do it on their own. They need our help. And so they say to us, you'll find comfort and peace and protection. You will be safe. You will be okay. Your papers, they will be in order. If you turn in your neighbor, if you turn in your family member, if you turn in your friend. This is where we are. I didn't make this story up. We didn't break the story. We stole it from somebody. I mean, we cited it. So technically we didn't steal it. The point is, it's a real story and this is really going on right now. Now you're thinking, why on earth does he put up a picture? Are we going to do math tonight? Are we doing statistics? We're not. I put up a bell curve for a reason. What I'll share with you tonight is based on the idea that we do live under a bell curve. We have relatively normal distributions to things. So I won't speak to you tonight in absolutes. I won't guarantee you I'm right in all cases. But what I want to do is share with you that in general, based on observation over a very long lifetime, these are the things that I've noticed. This is what I've concluded. And these are the things I think that we're up against, okay? So just to be clear, we did one math slide. I promise there'll be no more math, okay? Notice there's no numbers on it. All right, volunteer, whose picture is up there? All right, Niccolo Machiavelli. The father, by the way, of political science, he's considered to be. Machiavelli gave us a phrase that we use today, and most people don't know where it came from. That phrase is the ends justify the means. I'm going to try to tip this up a little bit without breaking anything. Bad for my posture. There we go. Maybe a little better. He gave us the phrase, the ends justify the means. Back in January, I had a lot of stuff in my head. I was writing in my head, and I needed to write something down on paper to get it out of my head. And I wrote two pieces that I published, two essays. One of them was entitled, Why They Cheat, meaning the other side. Anybody in here think that there was a little mishigas going on in the election back in 2020? Raise your hand. All right. Me too. Has anybody noticed that it seems like, in general, that the other side tends to be more willing to cheat than we are? Yeah, it kind of seems that way, right? So cheating, this young lady in front, we generally consider that to be unethical behavior, right? Right? How many, by the way, anybody in here ever have somebody say, well, that's not ethical. You can't do that. That's not ethical behavior. You've been told that before, right? By someone? Show of hands. How many people in this room feel that in general, you're an ethical person? Raise your hand. Wow, it's pretty universal. Okay. Anybody think they're unethical? Interesting. All right, so just for the viewing audience to note at home, everyone in the room is ethical. Here's a question. How many of you, show of hands, believe that there are people in the world who are unethical? Oh, it's interesting. All the hands went back up. So apparently we're sitting in a room full of unicorns. All right. So, yes. Okay. Let's see. All right. Hopefully this is better. Is this better? Thank you. Thank you that the feedback is coming from you and not from the microphone. And to people at home who couldn't hear me, trust me, you didn't miss anything. All right, so we have a bit of a problem, right? Everybody in here says they're ethical, and yet everybody in this room says there's people who aren't ethical. Well, I do some teaching and training in ethics, and one of the things I teach people to do is that when somebody says, you know, you're unethical, say, okay, under what system? Because you see, ethics are an interesting thing. We talk about them as if they're universally understood, that we all agree as to what they are. But there's a whole variety of different ethical systems. There's the objectivist system. There's the Christian ethic. There's the notion of, just drew a blank. That happens with old age, by the way. Just for the record, this is 7-Up, not vodka. Used to be vodka. That was a whole different lecture. There's Kantian ethics, categorical imperative. There's utilitarian ethics. There's altruism, the notion of self-sacrifice. So there's all these different systems of ethics. What people mostly mean when they talk about ethical behavior is, unfortunately, simply what in that moment they tend to feel what's right, or they tend to feel what's wrong, not measured against any particular system. Really, it's measured against mostly just how they feel. Now, I've been a business consultant for 21 years. I've dealt with privately owned companies in every industry you can think of. I've seen everything. And I have watched people that voted just like we did in the last election lie, cheat, steal, rob from their partners, take from their vendors, mistreat their customers. I've seen it all. Behavior that you would call unethical under any system that you choose. So are we any more ethical than the folks on the other side? I'd argue we're not. I'd argue that most people don't operate with a particular ethical system. I'd argue that most people, and it works fairly well, I guess, in general, we kind of operate on a system that's a little bit moral relativistic. What pleases us, what troubles us, we maximize one, we get rid of the other, and we make decisions. So why do they cheat? And why don't we? At least not as often. I think the reason for that is that we tend to be bound by something that they are not. How many people in here are adherents to or observance of either the Christian Bible or the Torah or both? Raise your hands. Okay. How many people in here are adherents to the United States written Constitution? Good show of hands. For you out there in viewer land, a lot of hands going up. Good for us. You know what those two things have in common? They are both objective written standards of conduct. They force us to honor them. They are outside of ourselves. They are something that gives us a sense of duty. And it's not a duty to ourselves. And it's not a duty we can rationalize. It's not a duty we can be relativistic about. It's objective and it's outside of us. Ask the typical liberal, do you have a sense of duty? They'll say, of course. Say, what do you have a sense of duty to? Well, to help others, to the greater good, to make things better. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means whatever they want it to mean. And that means that their ends can justify the means. Almost always. For us, any of you ever see the movie Animal House? Well, devil on one shoulder, and I won't do the dialogue because we have families watching. But the point of the matter is, we have that better angel Many of us, we have scripture. It's black letter, tells us right from wrong, gives us a sense of duty. We want to cheat in elections just like the other guys. But God says it's wrong. It's written right here. Constitution says I can't do that. And we can't get past that sense of duty. And that troubles us, but it holds us in check. Let us lose that sense of duty, and we can become no better than they are. But that's why they cheat. That's who they are. And that's an advantage they have over us behaviorally. So who are we today in America? We're dissidents. We are now living in a society where people who believe in the things we believe in, people who believe in private property rights, natural law, the values embedded in the Constitution, we are not on equal footing with the others. Some people think that last year, the election, maybe even Trump got more votes. Let's do this for a minute. Let's say that roughly both candidates got 75 million votes. So we could say, well, there's just as many of us as there are of them, right? So what's the problem? The problem is this. It's not about a head count. It is about what I call the political atomic weight. These folks, they control most levels of government. They control the mainstream media. They control the educational situation from K through college. They control the large corporate boardrooms. They control virtually every large municipal city level of government, all layers. They own it. If this were a military operation, we are badly outflanked and surrounded. It makes no difference how many of us there are. They've got all the heavy weaponry. And that means that while we still have a constitution and while we still have all of our rights on paper, we're not getting to operate and live with those rights on a day-to-day basis the same way they are. And that makes us dissidents. Our own state has turned on us. If anybody doesn't believe that, I can go back to the first slide. Turn in your neighbor, turn in your family member, turn in your friend. That's where we are. So in being cast in the role of dissidents, these are two of the famous ones, right? Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Lech Walesa. These are people that fought a long, hard, arduous struggle to reclaim the freedom that had been lost. They were persistent. They were relentless. They suffered greatly. We're going to talk more about what to do as dissidents in just a minute. If my computer will cooperate. So I want to show you something that I believe makes sense of all this. This is what was inside my head, and I needed to get it out. This is the structure of power in today's America. I want you to think of this series of concentric circles. At the center, we have government at all levels. Government is at the center because government is the one that has the power to arrest you and put you in jail. They have the guns. They have the ability to make laws and enforce laws. They can forcibly take away your freedom. So they are at the center of the power structure. But this diagram isn't drawn to scale because in the next layer, just outside of government, are large institutions, mainstream media, large corporations, the big banks, big tech, large college institutions. We have something that's going on in the United States today that's a bit backwards from the traditional model. Totalitarian societies tend to form from the government out. This one is actually being fed into government from large institutions. They are its lifeblood. Does anybody really think that Washington is doing more to drive policy than Google or Facebook or Twitter? We all know better, right? Or the large banks. By the way, this is not a conspiracy thing. I'm not a conspiracy guy. You don't need a conspiracy when everybody agrees. So this is an institutional move that's feeding government and giving those in government the money and the courage to do what they need to do to suppress our freedom and to force people like us to be dissidents. In the next ring, we have the supporters of oppression. These are individuals. And notice that there's two rings inside of it, different shades of green. The first one are the people who actively support the oppression. They are the ones who are all in on making people like you and I have fewer choices. The ones who want to take away our children's ability to be taught properly. The ones who want to take away what we're able to say in the workplace. All of it, fill in all those blanks. They're those people. And they're all in on suppressing our freedom. In the next ring, and we all know people like this, these are the ones who support the oppression, but don't do so actively. They do it passively, almost unwittingly. They're not active in politics. They're not informed on issues. They don't understand really what's going on. Their approach to analyzing things is sort of simple. It's heuristic. They just think, oh, well, it's good that we're teaching critical race theory in school. I mean, yeah, race is critical, so it should be a theory that's taught, right? Great depth of thought and analysis. They go along with what's happening in terms of the oppression of us and the suppression of our rights. They go along passively and unwittingly. They are ours to be taken, and we'll talk about how to take them in a moment. Next circle. These are the folks like us. But again, notice there's two shades. The first shade are those who are the passive opponents of oppression. We all know these people, and we have to be really, really careful about these people. We know who they are. They're the ones who say, wow, I can't believe what's happening. This stuff is terrible. Can't believe what's going on in America. This is so wrong. Well, you're going to speak up? You're going to go to the school board meeting? You're going to run for city council? I can't do that. You know, my family, I can't put my kids at risk. I could lose my job. You know, this is wrong, but gosh, there's just nothing I can do. We know those people, and it's easy for us. Every one of you here tonight is a dissident. You're showing up at a meeting that people would rather not have be held. You're showing up in a venue that's new because the other one couldn't be open, the old venue that you used to use. You come here at some level of risk and scorn by those who will say, what are you doing without a mask and you're out in public killing millions, right? But we know, I bet you know people who would have maybe liked to have been here tonight. I really shouldn't go to something like that. I'm not sure what that's about. It is easy for us to be disdainful and to be dismissive and to be critical of those people. It's easy for us to say, you're weak, you're cowardly. No, they're not. And we can't do that. We can't judge them. And most importantly, we can't lose them because they're on our side. They might not be able or ready to be in the fight with us, but look at the ring that's below them. Do we want to drive them there? We don't. We want to keep them engaged with us. So it's extraordinarily important to note that for those that you know who may not yet be strong enough to follow, who may not be strong enough to fight, not willing to fight, afraid to fight, don't lose them. Hang on to them. Hold their hand. Give them your arm. Throw them a rope. Don't let go. We cannot afford to lose them, and we can't drive them into the circle below. In the last ring, furthest removed from the power circle, the center of power, it's us, the ones willing to fight, the ones who are in the game, the ones who are willing to try to make a difference. So we're in this thing, right? Is everybody, raise your hand, are you in? All right, so we're all in. There's now we got to figure out, what do we do? I've got that. We'll get to that in 1 second. So we're the furthest removed from the ring of power. But you notice that there's a problem with this structure, right? There's a weakness built into it. The weakness is that there's actually no such thing as government. There's no such living thing as large institutions. These are just places that are filled with people. What people are they filled with? They're filled with the people that are in those outer rings. The ones who are supporting oppression, the ones who are against oppression. And that means each and every day, in our dining rooms, in our workplaces, in our classrooms, every single day, we are in their presence. We have an opportunity to engage. So engage we must. And we have to do it the right way. We have to do it constructively, because we will have an opportunity over time, over a long period of time, to begin to take those people in the circle just below us and make them willing to fight. And we'll be able to take the people in the circle just below them to perhaps, just perhaps, do the most powerful thing you can have happen in any conversion. We can cause them to tip their head, scratch their chin, and say, that's not right. And we need people to say, that's not right. There's an opportunity in America right now. What is, everybody know what that is? I'm so good with graphics, right? I mean, that's just, I just got to look for it. It's really good. It's an eclipse. All right. Has anybody noticed that there's a little bit of fighting going on inside the Democratic Party? That there's folks that, you know, they don't, before Biden took office, there were the arguments between Sanders and Cortez and Biden and his side. And we saw that back and forth going on, right? It's like, what's going on? They won, right? So there's that, you see that happening. People don't know quite what to make of that. I'd like to take a stab at explaining it to you. And I would like to show you why it's a really critical weakness that's going to provide us with an opportunity. So what is an eclipse? It's a moment in time where the sun and the moon appear to align so that then they are as one. And everybody wants to look at it. Don't stare at it without the glasses and all. Don't want people going blind over my presentation. You want to look at the eclipse and you look and it's over, right? They pass and then they're separated again. Let me explain what's going on. Everybody talks about socialism. Then you say, what's socialism? Right? I don't know. They get stuck, right? Socialism is, very simply put, nothing more than centralized management of economic and political policy. That's it. That's all it is. Except there's two different kinds of socialism. The first is the kind that Marx wrote about, where socialism was supposed to be a transitional phase from capitalism to communism, from the oppressive, monstrous, greedy capitalists to the utopic, it's 1968, summer of love, communist world. Socialism was an object in motion for Marx. It was not permanent. It was transitional. It was never meant to last. It was only supposed to be a here to there. It was a bridge. But there's another type of socialism, the kind that we saw in the 1920s and 30s, Italy, Spain, Nazi Germany. That's a different sort of socialism. That's where that centrally managed sort of economy winds up being permanent in nature. Government gets larger and larger, industries get bigger players and fewer of them, and then government and industry are allowed to act together in unison to do what? To centrally manage economic and political policy. That system, the second system, that's static. It's permanent. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, they are those kinds of socialists. They're fascists. They want big government and they want big business and they want it to just keep getting bigger. Bernie Sanders, AOC, they're good old-fashioned communists. God love them. Socialism's great for them for about 5 minutes. It's just a pathway. That's it. These two parts of the Democratic Party cannot coexist. They can't make peace. They'll never make peace. They are destined to be divided because one wants to keep moving and the other wants to stay put. That's going to cause them to fight and that will make them weak. And that gives us an opportunity. Imagine this. Let's say now, just to use even math, 80 million people voted for Joe Biden. All 80 million of them voted for socialism. Only 40 million of them didn't know they were because they don't really even understand what that is. The other 40 million, they all voted for socialism. Half of them voted for Biden's kind, and half of them voted for Sanders' kind, and never the two shall meet. It only looks like it right now because of what had just happened. But these two suns and moons, they're going to diverge, they're going to split, and that will give us an opportunity. So how do I explain this? Biden targets big business with his executive order. It's easy. I explain it this way. Pay no attention to it. If you'd like to, you can. Allow me to tell you what you're going to see over the next 3 years of substance that relates to that executive order. Absolutely nothing. And I can assure you that anything you do see has already been cleared by the big businesses it's designed to harm. They've already rubber stamped it. They're good. This was done. Now you can understand it. Why did he do it? He's trying to buy time and make the eclipse last longer. This is appeasement, socialist style. The fascists giving a hat tip to the communists. It won't last. It doesn't mean anything. What do we do? Here we go. I promised you that I was going to give you things to do tonight. I try to always keep my promise. First thing, above all, call yourself a dissident. Wear that label. Let people know you're not on board with this. I'm a dissident. I am not going along with what you're saying. I am not going along with what you're doing. I do not believe in this. We need a label. Let's call ourselves dissidents. Let's make it clear that we're in the fight. Next thing. The two most consequential people in all of human history, on the secular side and on the religious side, I don't think there's any debate here. The two most consequential people are Socrates and Jesus Christ. Everything that's happened in Western civilization since those two men, either in terms of the secular world or the religious world, happens in answer to them or because of them. They started a ball rolling. They had two things in common. First, by the way, they're also the most consequential dissidents, I should have said, in history. Two most consequential dissidents. Their dissidency has two things in common. Number one, they were both killed for their dissidency. That's not so good. Number two, they both acted out their dissidency by asking questions. They asked questions relentlessly. They taught by asking questions. We have to learn to ask questions. We have to question authority. We have to question our friends, our family, our coworkers. We have to learn to look at people when they're telling us something that isn't reasonable, and we have to say, why? Why not? And when we ask those questions, we're not just looking for the answers ourselves, we're looking for those around us to hear those answers so we can start to create that awareness. We need to ask questions. Going back to Charlie Kirk, people watch Charlie's videos, and I get them all the time. My friends will say, "Guy, I just saw a video of Charlie and he was engaging all these protesters on the street. And they're just crazy. And he was standing there and he's so calm and he's asking them questions and they're screaming and they're yelling and he's keeping us cool. And how does he do that?" And I tell him, well, that's because he's not asking the question so that he can hear their answer. He's asking the question so that the entire world can watch them answer. He does more teaching by asking and letting them expose their foolishness, their hatred, their anger, their ignorance on camera to the whole world. And then people who maybe don't engage or don't get it, they see that and they say, wow, that isn't right. That doesn't make sense. That person looks foolish. Ask questions. And remember, the answers aren't intended just for you. They're intended for those around you. Next, in this movement, this thing we call a movement, watch out for people who are not really, truly part of it, but are only seeking to profit of it or from it. Anybody ever read Dr. Seuss? I mean, before he was banned. Story of the Sneetches, right? All right. Stars on the belly, no stars on the belly, the no stars on the belly. They're feeling kind of glum, right? And so a guy shows up and says, you want stars? I'll sell you stars. And so the Sneetches come through and he sells them stars. And then the Sneetches who had stars say, well, no, we're not special anymore because they've got stars too. And he says, come on, I'll take your stars off. And the next thing you know, the Sneetches are running through the machines as fast as they can, stars on, stars off. They get so confused, they don't know what's going on. And the guy drives away with all their money. There are hucksters in this business, folks. Watch out for them. You can spot them. They're taking advantage of our fear and where we are in our desperation. Don't let them do it. Get rid of the notion of we can't lower ourselves to their level, because that's not what we're talking about. Remember this, and it relates to the issue of questions. When somebody on the other side does something horrible, we're not worried about what we do back to them because of it. We're worried about what we do that those people in the circles below us can see. Think of the others, not the enemy with whom you're engaged. Don't respond to them. Respond to the person, the people in those rings below you. Let them see what you do. Respond to them. It's not an eye for an eye. It's pointless. It is about reacting to what's been done by finding a way to convey to others what was just done. It's not tit for tat. It's useless. This is not a game of Pong, for those of you old enough to remember Pong. In dissidency, there's martyrs. Don't make yourself a martyr for no reason. How many of you know people who actually tell you, I'm going to post this on Facebook tonight and I'm going to get kicked off Facebook? And then they post it and they get kicked off Facebook and woohoo! And then they're done. They're out of the fight. It's useless. Lech Walesa said about the movement in Poland, he said the blood of Poland's fields had already run rich with the blood of martyrs. We had too many Poles who had died. We didn't need more martyrs. We needed people who could stay alive, work within the system, and gradually fight for change. Don't martyr yourself for no reason. But we will have martyrs. And when we do, we need to remember them. Trump wanted to build a wall. How about you guys build a wall? Build an online wall. List the names of people you find out who have lost their college scholarships because of a paper they wrote or a statement they made on Facebook. Keep a list of people who lose their jobs because of something they said in the workplace that was politically incorrect. Make a list of entertainers who lose contracts that you hear about. We need to make lists of the names of people we know who are martyred so that they add up. We need weight. And over time, those lists will give weight. And who's going to see those lists? The people in the circles below us. And maybe, just maybe, they'll say, wow, it isn't right. So keep track of the martyrs. Act in groups, not as individuals. Individual action is fine, I guess. But remember, force equals mass times acceleration. The greater the mass, the greater the force, assuming acceleration constant. But I said I wouldn't do math, right? So there's no math tonight. To the extent that you need to act, try to pull groups of people together to act. There's safety in it, there's comfort in it, there's assuredness in it, and there's more efficacy to it. So act in groups when you can. Stay forward focused. This is a in front of you battle. This is all about what's next. It is not about what's already happened. There's a lot of digging to do of what happened in the 2020 election. I get that. There's people doing that, good people doing that. But at the end of the day, while good people work on that, and it might be something that some of you are involved in, and that's terrific, it's about the next fight, and it's about the next engagement. It's about the next day. And we have to stay forward focused. To the extent we sit around and whine and cry about the election, that's useless. Does no good at all. If you're working on it, part of an audit, something, that's great. But otherwise, stay forward focused. The enemy's in front of us. In fact, they're all around us. So let's not sit and complain about what's already taken place. I want you to recruit members from that circle below us. You all know people who are afraid to step into that dissident circle, who are afraid to be active or feel they can't be. Don't push them. Don't frighten them away, but encourage them to join us. Find ways for them to contribute. Offer them ideas and suggestions. Hold out a hand and say, join me. And just as importantly, keep watching out for those people that move up from the circle just below them. Anybody here when you were in college or even after college, you ever get invited to a party by a friend where you didn't know anybody at the party? Anybody ever do that? All right, got a bunch of hands. Right now I say, hey, come on, it'll be great, it'll be great. Well, I don't know anybody. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. When you get there, I'll hang out with you and I'll introduce you to a bunch of people and it'll be great. You walk in the door, they see their best friend, they're in 4 rooms away and you're standing in the foyer saying, what in the hell am I doing here? Nobody likes that feeling. Think what it's like for the people that are coming from that circle below us, below people who think like we do, and they're wanting to step into the circle. We sure as hell better not leave them in the foyer. We need to walk them around. We need to introduce them to people. We need to make them feel like they've been at that party before, and we need to make them feel welcome. Don't turn your backs on other dissidents. Every dissident gets out. Nobody's left behind. We do not walk away from our fellow dissidents when they are being punished, when they're suffering, when we see a coworker at work being treated badly. We don't turn away in our cube and stare at the pictures of our family on vacation. We've lost that luxury. It's time for us to make sure that every dissident gets out. Nobody gets left behind. To be willing to turn your back is to be complicit. Don't do that. This isn't East Germany. Not yet. Stop throwing up all over social media. It is pointless. It's just pointless. There's no good to it. The only people that like it are, first of all, we like it. Oh, look what I just typed. That was so cool. I was so down. Just, oh, I can be just a little bit meaner. Send. Oh, look what I did. You didn't do anything. You didn't change any minds. If you want to vent, get a really great pillow and kick it around your house. But don't do it on social media. It's pointless. And all it does is get you taken down and get you martyred and you're out of the fight and we lost you. Stop throwing up all over social media. But here's one that's really hard, but it'll make you feel a little bit better maybe if you feel mean. On the other hand, the people you know who go on social media and who criticize and condemn people like us, we need to make them feel the pain and the sense of loss. How many of us have friends and family? We look at what they write. We look at what they say. We listen to what they say at a cocktail party. And they tell, oh, these Trump supporters, they're mean, they're racist, they're misogynists, they're nasty, they're all haters, they're Nazis, they're all this stuff. And say, well, I'm a Trump supporter. Oh, what? I didn't mean you. You're not like the rest of them. It's time for us to look at those people and say, yes, you did mean me. I'm one of those people you're condemning. And we're done. If you can't do that, it's okay, but just make note of what circle you're actually in. Because we have to be able to make the other folks feel that sense of loss. How dare we let them punish us and then act as if everything's okay? Well, he said they didn't mean me. Gosh, it must be okay. Dine with new friends and don't just serve them red meat. We need to start engaging with the other side, especially those people in that circle below, those ones who support oppression and don't understand it. We need to bring them into our homes, into our office cubicles, our break rooms, our classrooms, wherever we are. And we need to engage with them in a positive way. And we can't just tell them, Joe Biden's senile and Kamala Harris is a communist, and it doesn't do any good. It just bounces right off. Serve something other than red meat. I love red meat, but I also know too much of it is binding. I read that somewhere. The point is, we might be able to live on that diet for a bit, but we can't serve it to others. It's not effective. Take back our language. I just gave a speech at an event in South Dakota a weekend ago over the 4th of July, where I read something that we published at Human Events, and I would encourage everybody here to read it, not because I'm self-absorbed, although I might be, but that's not the reason why I'm asking you to read it. I called it a declination of codependence. We have become so codependent on others, this idea of not being willing to turn away, suffer loss, that we've surrendered everything to them. We've given them our language. We have to take it back. We're running out of words. We can't say this, we can't say that, I can't call you this, I guess I can't say anything. We are turning ourselves into a political movement of Helen Keller's. Great story, told once, not replicatable. So we have got to be insistent on taking back our language. Call things what they are. Call them what they're not. Don't be so quick and eager to say, when someone says to you, well, are you going to condemn January 6th? Say, I don't have any need to condemn January 6th. How about you do it if it makes you feel better? But I'm not going to do anything just because you ask me to. If somebody says, don't you consider that a great act of heroism? Say no. I don't mean January 6th. I just mean something in general. Aren't you willing to condemn? No, I'm not. Aren't you willing to applaud? No, I'm not. I'll condemn when I feel the need. I'll applaud when I want to applaud. I'll apologize when I feel the need personally to apologize. When somebody says you're a racist, how many people, raise your hands, tell the truth? Somebody talks about a conservative being racist. How many people say, I know 4 black people and I helped a Mexican cross the street once, and we do this whole thing. We start to prove, by God, I'm not a racist. Look at all I've done. I have black friends. Stop it. Somebody calls you a racist. Somebody talks about your politics being that way. Say, your words, not mine. Don't let them bully you. Thank you. Here's a fun one. Learn to lose. Losses can be wonderful things. This is a long battle, folks. And if you're not willing to lose, not going to be able to win. You could make an argument that if you surveyed people, the most recognized battle in all of American history fought on American soil, the number one most recognized battle is likely the Alamo. Remember the Alamo. I don't know if you guys read the paper, but we lost really badly there, right? Go well. A remarkable loss that ultimately led to Texas's statehood. Losses matter. Every time we lose, we are building up a body of work that other people are watching. There is no shame in loss. There's necessity in it. Absolute necessity. So keep fighting, keep losing. Every time you lose, raise a glass and celebrate and say, by God, we lost. There's another one. Now let's go lose again. And let's keep piling them up till somebody notices. It's counterintuitive, but that's the battle we're in. A couple more slides and then a final story. Up on the screen are two famous philosophers, Thomas Hobbes and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. If you say Jacques like that, it just sounds so cultured, right? Well, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Everybody with me, right? Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Oh, that's beautiful. Hope you people at home are doing that too. It's the end of tonight's French lesson. Thomas Hobbes was the English philosopher who wrote Leviathan, and he talked about the nature of man, and he didn't paint a very pretty picture. He said that we were all basically monsters at heart, that we were fearful creatures, that we were nothing but moral relativists, that our ethics were nothing more than taking what I want and avoiding what I didn't want, and that was our whole calculus. Rousseau, on the other hand, said we're fundamentally good. We're wonderful people. And for Rousseau, mankind started to fall apart the day, as he basically put it, I'm paraphrasing, the day the first man dragged a woman into a home to make her his and had to have a piece of private property. That ruined us all. We're having this debate today. Understand how critical this is. Everything we're talking about on some level comes down to whether men and women are fundamentally good or fundamentally bad. Every form of socialism, every form of collectivism relies on something. It relies on Rousseau being right. Because if Rousseau is wrong and men aren't fundamentally good, but we surrender all of our lives and our control to others, if we mix a bad nature with collectivism, what do we get? That. Jeff Goldblum in The Fly. Part human DNA, part fly. It's a monster. And I would suggest to you that if we let this collectivist beast continue to grow without a fight, this is our future. Now, let me tell you one last story. And now you're looking at a slide and you're saying, what on earth? I'll make sense of it for you. I mentioned that over the 4th of July, I was at an event where I was a speaker in South Dakota, Sturgis, South Dakota. Buffalo Chip Campground. Anybody ever been there? There's somebody in the back who's been there. I didn't see any buffalo chips while I was there. I did almost step on a snake while I was jogging. Really glad I played basketball. Jab step to the right, missed the snake. Still got it at almost age 60. This event was the ultimate dissident event. It was labeled as the Red, White, and Blue Rockin' Across America Tour, Right away, you can tell how offensive it was. Its imagery was fireworks and flags and red, white, and blue. And oh, dear Lord, in the original poster, the word patriot was there. Ah, terrifying, right? Anybody would be scared of that. From the moment the event started to be promoted, something strange happened. This, by the way, wasn't a large event. It wasn't a controversial event. It wasn't tied to anybody who was particularly controversial. From the moment it started to get promoted on social media, it was suppressed. At Human Events, we wrote a story about this. I mean, I was getting screenshots. People would get the event flyer, they'd post it on their Facebook page, bang, Facebook jail within minutes. 10 days, suspended. Post it on Twitter. Post comes down, taken down by Twitter. Couldn't figure it out. Our media person who runs our back room for Human Events is connected to, well, let's just say, connected to virtually every major conservative media personality in the country. When she took the event and attempted to put it out on social media as an expert and with all the connections and knowledge she had, she got a hold of me. She said, Brent, you're right. This thing just keeps coming down. And she couldn't figure it out. She said, it's so disproportionate. I mean, it's like shooting a pigeon with an elephant gun. What are they doing? She'd never seen it before. So then we get to the event. Remember that little thing I was talking to you about ethics a little while ago, about our side not really being any better than their side? Well, when we got there, we saw that. We saw people that had made commitments that didn't honor those commitments to appear. We saw people who didn't perform or deliver the way they were supposed to perform or deliver. We saw all sorts of things at that event happen while we were there that could have made just about anybody want to quit. And yet, the people who were there persisted and found great joy in the camaraderie and the fellowship. And we made a very successful event out of one that everyone had tried to suppress and destroy. We were there as dissidents. But why the bare feet? Because there was a moment. So the organizer of this event, dear friend, Felissa at the Patriot Party Rocks, put this event together. And we were having an activity on a Friday afternoon out by a water area in the park. The only water, by the way, I think in South Dakota. It turns out that part of the problem we were having at this event was actual sort of internal issues with some of the staff that were turning people away at the gate when they were showing up. People who were driving from a long way away, people who had tickets to this event. So our organizer, Felissa, walks out of her home residence where she's staying, which is right near the gate. Now, the Buffalo Chip campground isn't paved. It's all gravel and rocks and the whole bit. So she walks out the door and she's holding her shoes in her hand. And as she does, the gate's right here, and she sees a car turning away with a woman who's visibly crying, upset, driving the car, windows down. She's turning her car around to leave. Without putting her shoes on, she runs full speed at the car, shouting for the person to stop, carrying her shoes in her hands, running on stones. What stops the car? Where are you going? We were turned away. We came all the way here from Iowa, I believe. We were told we're not on the list. She reaches into her bag and she gives them all passes and says, you're all set. Go on in. You're good. And they go in and they enjoy the event. Later that night, when she's hobbling around in a manner that's just awful and telling this story to us, somebody said, you know, why did you do that? Why did you run across the rocks? And she said, what else was I supposed to do? They were patriots. They were here. I had to do something. So, do not think that this mess we've got ourselves in by our own decades of neglect, of turning away, of looking the other way, of praying this would go away, do not think that we're going to be able to get through this without feeling some pain. Take off your shoes, run on the rocks, embrace your inner Felissa, and do what you have to do to fight back. Because this is not going to go away on its own. It's time for the dissidents to fight. So walk barefoot on the stones, run if you have to, because the enemy's not going away. Thank you so much. Thank you. I have to clap for all you guys giving me a standing ovation. That's amazing. Oh my God, thank you. So kind. I guess I can take that picture off. We'll throw the chart back up there for fun.
I believe, can you hear me? I believe we have just been treated to one of the fiercest, most important voices in America today. So now we're going to have cards passed out, as is our tradition, so you can ask a question, and then we'll have our volunteers collect them. Put your hand up if you would like a card. And we also have our guests online, and Erica Amarati, former VP of Programs, is very sweetly, give Erica a round of applause, is very sweetly manning that. And she will ask some questions from the online folks, so everybody will be included.
I'm going to have another cocktail.
All right. Brent's belling up to the bar here. So while we wait for your questions and accumulate them, I'm going to throw a softball at this guy because he's been working so hard tonight. You got to tell us about the 2 weeks you had of self-doubt.
Oh, the 2 weeks of self-doubt. So so to be real clear, I picked Biden to beat Trump in very, very early 2019. And I picked Trump to win long before he declared in around February or March of 2015. The moments of doubt I had were when I overestimated the impact of a moment. You know that whole thing about looking in a rearview mirror and the objects aren't really at the right distance? Well, sometimes we get fooled by proximity, this sort of test of, you know, something being so soon or so close to us, we can't evaluate it. Well, in Trump's case, it was somewhere around August of 2020 when he went up to Wisconsin and just gushed all over Paul Ryan. And it was bad. And I can't stand Paul Ryan. Oh. Anyway, Paul Ryan, by the way, not an objectivist, not anymore. He said he read Atlas Shrugged. He should have read it again. Anyway, his ringing endorsement of Ryan was so offensive to so many Trump supporters. And I happened to have been in Canton, Ohio at the time, and I was going back and forth to the gym and stuff in Ubers, and I was talking to my Uber drivers. And so I was talking about this, and there were Trump supporters saying, oh, well, if he's going to support Ryan, I can't support him. And I got tricked by this for a moment, for about a week. I thought, I think Trump just did himself in. Here I thought I was so certain for so long. And of course, it's not what happened. And after a while, I started to realize it didn't stick. And I was fooled by how close some of these people were to me. And I was also fooled by my own intense dislike of Paul Ryan. With regard to Joe Biden, I actually got fooled early on. So I believed way back in even 2018 that he would run and that he could very easily beat Trump. But it was right around the time he was declaring or about to, when the whole #MeToo thing came after him. You'll recall it was very early. And I either overestimated its strength or underestimated how phony it is. Because it's really sort of a phony movement, right? It's just a random kind of hate movement and an excuse to hate people. But there's a hierarchy within Team Left. And while Biden may have offended some, overall, his teammates, after they chastised him a bit, they returned to him. And so I had overestimated the impact of that, and it caused me to doubt myself. But once the team reformed around Joe, then it turned out to be right. So always be careful about analyzing something and having a rational reason for making a conclusion, and then being steered away from that rational conclusion by sort of an irrational emotional moment, right? That's what happened to me. So full confession, I got emotional. And if you don't ask me a question, I'm going to cry.
Okay, then I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. Okay, there's a lot of good questions here. So let me
I have a lot of 7-Up.
Good. Okay. So one question I have right now is, where does the judiciary stand in terms of everything? They seem to punt every ball.
Right. Well, they punted on the election. There was no question that they were going to punt on the election. That was easy, right? So think of what would have happened. This is a long question to answer. I'm going to try to be very brief, but I did a lot of writing on this and speaking on it at the time. The cases that were going to be brought, that needed to be brought to the courts to prove that something had gone on November 3rd, these are cases that in a normal legal process would take years to put together and build. It would take you years to file. You do it right before the statutory deadline, and then you'd ask for 20 continuances, and the case would come to court 5 years later. Because these were complex cases, and they were being brought within minutes. Now, the court, occupied still by humans, had a bunch of humans looking at these things saying, okay, I've got quick, sort of almost heuristic cases being brought to me, asking me to overturn or stop or do something to disrupt an election in a nation that's teetering on the brink of destroying itself. I'll pass. I'll take a pass. And they found a way to pass. Some of my friends asked me what I thought would happen when Texas brought the case, along with a couple other states, saying that essentially their rights had been violated by the other states and what they did in their election vote counting. I said, oh, the court's got to find a way to skip the case. Because if I read the filing, and I'm not a constitutional law expert, but I'm educated, and I can read and I understand the law. The Texas case was really compelling. And if the Supreme Court had taken it and had a rule on it, they would have wanted to rule against it because they would have tossed the whole nation into chaos if they hadn't. And I would have loved to have read the opinion that they would have had a right to rule against the Texas case. So instead they punted. So we have a court at the Supreme Court level that knows the nation is on very tenuous footing. They're not looking to disrupt it. They know that virtually any decision that can be made is going to be one that leads to all sorts of controversy. So when they can, they punt, and it's because we're dealing with humans. The more disturbing thing is how increasingly our Constitution is becoming more of a reference document than it is a binding piece of final law. That's what we need to fear. Notice that by the day, it more and more becomes like a reference document. It is something now that is taken into consideration in decisions, but it does not feel like it's being followed. And that is, by the way, the other side's target. They're trying to blow up the United States Constitution.
There appears to be an uprising by dissidents led by parents rebelling against school boards. Can you please comment?
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
There appears to be an uprising of dissidents represented by parents standing up against school boards. Could you please comment?
Yes, God love them. Look, it's absolutely necessary. This is what we have to do. We have to be relentlessly present. Relentlessly present. And this is about working within the system. So the parents that are fighting the school boards, are taking the local process. We have a meeting, we get to, maybe we have to write our name down ahead of time to appear. We go through the process. We have to get in line early at the meeting. Only the first 20 will be accepted. Make up your rules. There's rules everywhere. What are these parents doing? They're working within the system and they are showing up and they are being relentless. They're not trying, by the way, they're not, for the most part. Notice, by the way, every once in a while, the news might grab somebody who goes crazy at the school board meeting. And maybe it gets captured on a video, right? And everybody loves it. Oh, it's great. Look at them. They got thrown out of the school board meeting. And all they wind up doing when they do that is they give all the other people in the room, those folks in the green circle, right? They say, wow, look at that loon. Wow, they're right. Everybody is like those people on January 6th. Stop it. Show up, be persistent, work within the system, be relentlessly present. I love what those people are doing at the school board meetings.
This next one's from our friends playing at home.
Okay.
And there's a question came up. I'll paraphrase it. You came up with a great list of things we could do to be dissidents. For those of us that are rookies, that are probably most of us,
Yeah.
what are the 2 or 3 things we should do first?
So I really do think that of everything on the list, that to start to discipline yourself, to start to work on the self-discipline and the self-control, to not get yourself tossed out of the bar, right? To not get bounced out of the school board meeting. Do learn to control your rage, your words. Understand that when you use very strong language, when you use, when you use profanity, and when you create some sort of offensive meme and all those things, understand that the audience that enjoys your message is this audience you already own. So start to discipline yourself in a way so that you can reach the people that aren't comfortable to reach. That's the key. We have to get really uncomfortable. So the very first thing you have to do as a beginner is leave your comfort zone. Get yourself out of, joking, right, about, I wasn't really joking, the old days of vodka instead of 7-Up. Look, one of the things you learn in recovery right away is that you got to change who you hang around with. You got to change your behaviors. You can't expect to behave the old way and get a different result. So if you're new to this, start to think about how to engage others more constructively. Enforce that discipline on yourself. Don't just eat and serve red meat.
One of our audience members wants to ask about the fight against big tech, about the big institutions. Should they withdraw their money from the major organizations like Wells Fargo and Wall Street to smaller credit unions, et cetera? Is that a way of fighting back?
Well, certainly it's a way of fighting back, but understand, so this is it's a great question, right? I don't really believe that you're going to harm Chase Bank by, running and closing your checking account and taking out your CDs and, say, well, by God, I'll show them. I spent 15 years in the banking industry. Let me assure you, they couldn't care less. All right. But so there's this guilty feeling we have, right? So I love Starbucks coffee because I love really bitter, burn tasting things. It fits my temperament, right? It's who I am as a person. And say, well, look at all the bad things Starbucks does. Right. I get all the bad things Starbucks does. But I think for each individual, just make your own choice about whether or not your own personal boycott really makes you feel better. If it does, do it. Understand, though, that unless you can get a great body of people to do it, force equals mass times acceleration. And our best hope isn't to pull our money out of Chase Bank. Our best hope over time is to pull the minds out of Chase Bank that run it and pull them into our camp. That's going to take a very long time. So it'll be more important to actually change the behaviors and attitudes. And that's going to call for this relentless personal commitment and change in behavior. So I'm not against personal boycotts of things. I just think that they should be done really almost more for your own self. Like, this makes me feel better. Good, do it. I'm not going to discourage it. Just don't overestimate the efficacy, if that makes sense.
Could you give some examples of reclaiming the language?
Well, a bunch of them that would probably get me kicked off the internet right now. Look, we're right now we've got a situation where we're afraid of using terms like masculine and feminine. I don't know, I kind of like men who are men, and I love women that like to be women. And I think that we ought to be willing to say that masculinity is a good thing. And I like masculinity, and it's not toxic. And I think that we ought to be able to call people by their pronouns that actually fit them, instead of just randomly, however they might want to toss around the English language. It's okay for a person to insist that they be called something. It's perfectly okay for us to insist that we're not going to misuse the King's English. So we can all think of a number of examples across the board where language is being corrupted because we're being told we can't say that. I mean, there's stories every day. They get so ridiculous that they almost become, it seems like Monty Python is now putting together the dictionary. So we're really living in that sort of a world. I swear to God, the Monty Python team and Mel Brooks are writing all of American culture right now. We're going to wake up one morning and say, wait, oh, this was all satire? None of it was real? So we all know the words we're talking about. And I just think that if you have the right word for what you want to express, it's this simple. Use the word. Don't stop and think, well, I guess I'm not supposed to use that word anymore. If it's the right word, use the word. Don't be afraid. We're fighting on their terms. They're taking our language from us. They have to stop. By the way, in a sense, they're not actually taking our language from us. We are. We're surrendering it. What could be worse? You think, God, it's terrible to have our freedom taken away. It's not the worst thing that can happen. We're giving it away. Stop it. All of us, right? Let's stop it. Use the right words, whatever the words are.
A couple of questions about the administration. This question is specifically, when Biden departs due to the 25th Amendment, who will Kamala have as her new vice president? And then another question is, who do you think the next president will be?
Fun questions. Look, it is a little too early for me to do the whole Swami thing. I will tell you this. I believe this with regard to the next president. I really, and it's not terribly original, but it is based on more than just what the press might be saying, but based on the way I look at things, the way I've looked at them in the past, right? I think that if Ron DeSantis wants this, he'll get it. And I think he's very electable. I watch with interest, as maybe you all do, this odd thing that perhaps the press is making a bit more of than it really exists between Trump and DeSantis. It would be a terrible mistake, I believe, for our country. Forget politics. I think it would be a terrible mistake for Donald Trump to do anything to really try to harm Ron DeSantis, because DeSantis is remarkably electable. And he's not just electable. You know, we thought Mitt Romney was electable. It's not just about being electable. It's that Ron DeSantis, based on his behavior to this point, is actually worth electing. And that's the bigger point, right? Who would Kamala have as her? I just, there's so many jokes in my head and I can't do them. None of them are good. All of them are after dark jokes and the sun is still out. Look, I don't know who she would pick, but I do know this. I would believe it very strongly that she wouldn't actually be picking anybody. I think the Democratic Party right now is very much is very much set up like a star chamber. And again, I'm not a conspiracy guy. It just seems quite obvious. It took a remarkable effort and an internal unification to get Joe Biden across the finish line to be elected president. He certainly didn't do that on his own. He certainly didn't pick Kamala Harris on his own, right? So whoever would get picked, she's not picking them. That's the only thing I would feel confident in saying.
Talk about the specific reason that the teachers union supports CRT.
Wow. Super complex question. I think there's a lot of things at work with critical race theory in the teachers union. You know, critical race theory is like a third generation derivation. It's from first critical theory itself, and then critical legal theory, and then critical race theory. There's a long chain that goes back to the Frankfurt School. I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about a sort of philosophy that, and I will answer the question because I do have an answer. It's just an awful one. We're talking about a philosophy really in critical theory that, to oversimplify it in a way that's not almost responsible, but we're kind of saying that the object in and of itself doesn't actually exist in any real sense, absent the experience and perception of the person viewing and acting with the object, right? So the object, the thing in and of itself, isn't necessarily real until it's mixed with our perception, our use, and our experience. So in other words, everything is nothing and everything is what you want it to be, is sort of what it boils down to. Critical race theory, when you really strip it away and boil it down, is an excuse to hate that is legitimized by the idea that there is a serious philosophical foundation behind it. This is supported by critical race theory. So give me your stuff, right? That's where it is. It gets there very, very quickly. So for the teachers' unions to embrace its teaching, this is simply, and I hate to sound this way, but I really do believe this, going back to the notion of Hobbes and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. I really do believe that we're not necessarily driven by better angels. I was reading Freud on the way here on the airplane, so there you go. I mean, Freud was Hobbes on steroids. And at the end of the day, this is a way to gin up more hatred and passion. People who are motivated and aroused by hatred tend to be more aggressive, tend to be more active. It's one of the reasons people like us can tend to get beaten, because we might not be as hate-driven, that sense of duty tapping us on the shoulder. So when the teachers union embraces this, they're creating a constituency that is more motivated and inspired to support them back. It's a way to channel it. So said differently, if we were in a Star Wars movie, they've learned to use the power of the dark side, right? That's what we're seeing. So we need to be aware of that and understand that behind critical race theory is simply a philosophical tool used for the expression of hatred.
My mind is reeling that you were reading Freud on the plane and thinking about
Right.
that comparison that you just made.
Civilization and its discontent.
Okay.
Great book. Dark.
Dark. Very
Not
dark.
a pessimist. I'm just a realist,
Right.
but they look a lot alike.
But you have to recognize that all the psychological philosophers' psychology was based on their own stuff. So we're going to talk to Brent longer after the show here. Brent, 3 questions that we should all be asking publicly.
3 questions that we should all be asking publicly. Well, so if I'm going to tell you to ask questions, I guess I have to tell you what questions to ask. But it's not, look, it isn't about giving, I'm not going to duck the question, but it's situational. So it's not about the 3 questions to memorize. It is about a mindset to have, to be constantly questioning. So we have a feature that we do at Human Events called To Tell the Truth. And To Tell the Truth is where we take an article, say by the New York Times, and we look at that and we say, here's what they told you. Okay, but here's what they didn't tell you. Here's what they told you that was wrong, right? Here, and here's, so we point out what was completely missing or misrepresented in that story. And we do that with this heading about the To Tell the Truth series. And we talk about how we're trying to bring skepticism back into the American experience. We've lost our skepticism. Skepticism isn't about having 3 set questions. Skepticism is about always questioning. Now, we don't want to question to the point where we are paralyzed and unable to move, right? But we have to be constantly looking at what we're being told to do. And we have to be asking, the key questions you want to, I said them earlier, they're why and why not? Sir, you can't walk that way on this park path. Why? Well, because it's not safe. You could give someone the virus, but I'm outside. Well, the rule is still that you have to walk in this direction. But why? And it's the relentless questioning we have to do. And I can't stress enough, it's not for us to hear the answer. It's for those around us. The best way to expose a fool is to have them expose themselves through their inability to answer a question. So the questioning purpose is all for the purpose of exposing others. Okay?
So,
sorry, I feel like I ducked that, but I didn't because I can't think of, the 3 questions you would ask here aren't the 3 you would ask there. So I wasn't trying to be evasive.
Brent, we have more questions than the group has probably time for, but I want to let you know that Brent has offered to stay after for a few minutes and speak to you. So I hope you'll take advantage of that if we didn't get to your question tonight. But I want to close on this one because,
Okay.
What would a Chicago area person know more than about staying in California? You and I were having a little debate about whose shutdown was worse, and I was offering Sarasota, you were offering somebody from Illinois, and frankly, being from Illinois, I have let's just say we have a lot of governors in jail. But I think this question is a good one to close on because I don't think you've personally ever been asked this before.
Okay.
We want to flee to Florida or Texas. Right. Let me just take a poll in the room. How many people have thought about moving? There you go. Okay. Why should we stay in California? It seems too far gone. Are we stupid for staying?
Oh, it's so funny. Believe it or not, I've actually been asked this question before about what state should I move to? And I'm like, wow, I'm like part political science guy and part realtor. Look, there's a really serious answer to this question. And that is the decision about where you're going to move is not one that should simply be made on political grounds. We live in a country where there's really no safe place to run. We're even in Florida, where Governor DeSantis continues to commit what we call at Human Events random acts of federalism. It's our term we use. We love that term. By the way, speaking of using language, when there's a story about, say, a Hollywood star loses a job because of their politics, we write the story and we headline it with martyred. And when we have somebody who's taken out of a role or something because of their being white or a male or something else, we call it bigotry, right? Because that's what it is. We're not afraid to use those strong terms. But if we get too caught up in this whole, I'm going to move over here because of my state's politics, it's really easy for us. I'm going to give you a deeper answer. It's really easy for us to get too obsessed with this thing, this battle we're in and this fight and this thing we call politics. I had somebody ask me recently, somebody a bit older than me and for whom I have an extraordinary amount of personal respect. He said, how do you do what you do every day and stay sane? How do you not just go crazy with what's going on? And I said, look, it's easy. I take this really seriously. I'm in the fight. I'm never going to retire. I'm going to work at this until either my mind, body, or both fail. But just because I'm in the fight doesn't mean that I somehow or other have to stop living and enjoying my life. I go to the gym every day. I love watching British television. I make people in the stores where I live smile wherever I go. I live a good life, and I enjoy every waking minute of it. And yet I'm engaged in a battle that's so serious. I'm here in front of you today, begging you to stand and fight with me. But this is not a binary choice. So it's not about I'm going to fight or I'm going to enjoy my life. I'm enjoying my life while I'm fighting. And all of us can do that. And that means that if we make a decision to pack up and leave our state simply because of politics, well, then maybe we need to see if we can check a few more boxes in terms of why we're making that decision, right? So my wish to all of you is that you be warriors, but that you be happy warriors, because otherwise you're going to end up some number of years from now lying on a deathbed, realizing that you spent your whole life angry, fighting, resentful, not liking those that were trying to do things to you. And you're going to be out of time and you're going to say, my God, what have I done? And I'm determined not to do that. So that's my wish for all of you tonight. Thank you. Thank you so much.